Look, let's just jump right into it. Today's explainer is a high-yield masterclass, and it is designed specifically to decode the top 10 most absolutely crucial board exam questions for Chapter 7, Control and Coordination. If you are stressing about how to conquer your upcoming board exams, take a breath because you are in exactly the right place. We are going to break down exactly how living things react to their environments, and we're going to do the whole shebang by focusing strictly on the highest value exam questions.
Okay, really quick, here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the core concept, then the human nervous system, animal hormones, coordination in plants, plant growth and movement, and finally, we'll wrap it up with a high-speed 1-minute final review.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the core concept.
So every single living thing has to react to the world around it, right? Whether that's a sudden change in light, a quick touch, or maybe the presence of certain chemicals. And these stimuli lead us directly to our very first board exam question. Define control and coordination. Honestly, this is the foundational concept of the entire chapter. It sets the stage for literally everything that follows. It's the ultimate what and why question. Because organisms, they don't just exist in a vacuum. They have to respond to stimuli to survive, and they've got to do it in a highly organized way.
Now, when we talk about this control and coordination, we really have to look at the massive night-and-day difference between animals and plants. Animals have this incredibly dedicated control center, a brain, along with a full nervous system. And this allows for some incredibly fast responses, which are then backed up by hormones. But plants? Well, no brain, no nervous system at all, actually. They rely entirely, and much more slowly, on hormones to coordinate their activities. So the big takeaway here is that while both absolutely respond to their environments, their toolkits for doing so are completely different.
Moving right along to Section 2, the human nervous system. Let's shift our focus strictly to that animal toolkit for a second, specifically how our own bodies process information so rapidly. When we need a fast reaction, this is the system that steps up to the plate. This brings us to questions 2 and 3, which ask you to draw and label a neuron and the human brain. Now, I know, drawing questions can definitely cause a little exam anxiety, but seriously, don't sweat it. You do not need to be an artist to score full marks here. Knowing exactly what labels the examiners are hunting for is, honestly, more than half the battle.
So, here are the essential labels you absolutely must include. No exceptions. First up, the neuron. Remember, the neuron is the structural and functional unit of the nervous system. You've got to make sure that is crystal clear in your diagram. Then, for the brain, which is our ultimate control center, you need to clearly section out the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. Oh, and within that hindbrain, examiners are specifically looking for you to label the cerebellum and the medulla oblongata. Nail these specific labels, and you're going to ace these questions for sure.
All right, let's look at question 4. Explain reflex action with a reflex arc. Think about what happens if you accidentally brush your hand against a hot pan on the stove. You yank your hand away instantly, right? You don't just stand there and consciously think, wow, that's really hot. I should probably move my hand now. No way. That instant, lightning-fast reaction is exactly what this question is testing you on.
So, a reflex action is a quick, completely automatic response to a stimulus. And what's really fascinating here is the actual pathway the signal takes. To make the response as fast as physically possible, it literally bypasses the brain. Instead, that signal travels through a reflex arc directly to the spinal cord. And the spinal cord immediately fires back the command to pull your hand away. It's the spinal cord that manages both voluntary and involuntary actions in this kind of quick-fire scenario.
Okay, on to Section 3, animal hormones.
So we've talked about our fast-acting nerves, but animals also have a totally different system of chemical messengers that work right alongside them. And this brings up question 5. Differentiate between the nervous and endocrine systems. You guys definitely put a star next to this one because it is a classic board exam favorite. Examiners just love testing your understanding of how our body's dual control setup works.
Let's just compare them head-to-head. The nervous system is controlled by nerves, obviously. It uses electrical impulses, which means its response time is incredibly fast, just like that reflex action we literally just talked about. The endocrine system, on the other hand, is controlled by chemical hormones secreted by glands. Because these chemicals have to physically travel through your bloodstream, the response is generally a bit slower, but the trade-off is that it allows for widespread, long-lasting coordination across your entire body.
Drilling down a bit deeper into that endocrine system, we hit question 6. Explain the functions of the pituitary gland. Think of it this way. If the endocrine system is a giant puzzle, The pituitary gland is the absolute most important piece, sitting right there in the center.
The absolutely crucial point you need to remember is this. The pituitary is known as the master gland. Why? Because it acts like a boss overseeing an entire team of workers. It oversees and directly controls the other major endocrine glands in the body, and that includes the thyroid, adrenal, pancreas, testes, and ovaries. You really can't understand animal hormones without understanding this one master controller.
Let's pivot a bit to Section 4, coordination in plants.
Now remember, we established earlier that plants do not have a brain. They have no nervous system. So how in the world do they survive and react? We're actually bundling questions 7 and 10 here to find out. Explain plant coordination and name the 5 plant hormones. Since a plant can't exactly just get up and run away from danger or walk over to grab some food, they coordinate all their activities, their growth, their responses to the environment, entirely using chemical signals. And those signals are plant hormones.
I really want you to notice how incredibly specific the function of each of these 5 hormones is. This table right here, this is super high-value exam material. First up, we have auxin. That's the growth hormone that helps shoots bend toward light and aids in root formation. Second is gibberellin, which increases stem growth and breaks seed dormancy. Third is cytokinin. That one promotes cell division and actually delays the aging of leaves. Fourth is abscisic acid, or ABA for short. This is your growth-inhibiting hormone. It stops growth, causes seed dormancy, and closes stomata during water shortages. And finally, ethylene, which is the hormone responsible for ripening fruits and causing leaves and flowers to fall off.
Moving into Section 5, plant growth and movement.
Okay, so we know the chemicals involved now, but how do they actually translate into physical movement? Brace yourselves for some highly tested exam territory with questions 8 and 9. Differentiate between tropic and nastic movements, and explain phototropism. These questions are really all about understanding how a plant's movement relates to the actual direction of whatever stimulus it's reacting to.
So tropic movements are directional. The plant grows specifically towards, or sometimes away from, the stimulus. Nastic movements, however, do not depend on the direction of the stimulus at all. The absolute best example of a nastic movement is the touch-me-not plant, also known as Mimosa pudica. If you touch its leaves from literally any direction, they dramatically fold and close up. The direction of your touch doesn't dictate the direction of the fold. That right there is a nastic movement.
On the flip side of that, we have directional tropic movements, which answers question 9 perfectly. There are 4 main types you really need to know for the exam. Phototropism is growth towards light. Just think of a sunflower turning its head to face the sun. Geotropism is growth in response to gravity, where roots grow downward and shoots grow upward. Hydrotropism is roots growing directionally towards a water source. And finally, thigmotropism is growth in response to touch, like how climber plants coil specifically around a fence or a support structure.
All right, we made it to Section 6, the 1-minute final review. Let's do this. Here is your ultimate exam cheat sheet. Let's lock this in. Remember, the brain is the control center. The neuron is the structural and functional unit of the nervous system. A reflex action is a quick, automatic response. The pituitary is the master gland. And for plants, auxin is the growth hormone, ethylene is for fruit ripening, and ABA is the growth-inhibiting hormone. Seriously, keep these facts locked in your memory for test day and you'll do great.
Wow, congratulations! You have successfully powered through the absolute most critical concepts of Chapter 7. You now understand exactly how organisms control and coordinate just to survive in their environments. But that actually leaves us with a massive, fascinating question. We've mastered how organisms survive, but how on earth do they reproduce and carry on their species? Keep that question in the back of your mind because that is exactly what we are going to unpack in our next explainer on Chapter 8. Thank you so much for joining me today. Keep reviewing those diagrams, and I'll see you next time.